So we have a special guest with us today. Skits.
Skittles.
Oh, bye, Skits.
Well, he's locked in here, so he can't eat the plastic.
Well, that's good. That's
Mhm.
good. I often say one should not eat the plastic.
You know, there's people on like that shit. What's the show? The My Strange Addiction. How like we can't eat
Oh,
raw cookie dough because we're gonna die of salmonella, but they can eat a mattress or
well,
plastic
yeah.
or drywall.
I like the one who was eating charcoal,
Yeah, like
burnt charcoal.
I'm not allowed to have cookie dough, but again,
Hey, I haven't had mozzarella on a pizza since we were in Hilton Head Island, I think it was.
yes, that was a
Yeah,
vivid experience.
that was. We could do a podcast on that one trip. I mean, it wouldn't be anything about like toasty ghosty sort of things. It would just be
No,
the terrifyingness of our family. Um, if that's a word, terrifyingness.
it is now.
It is now because I used it. All right.
Yep.
So welcome back. Here we are. This is episode 2. We've made 2. Peace. Um, and as I said, I was going to be bringing stories of Bigfoot because that's always been one of my biggest interests in the paranormal. I mean, besides like ESP and wanting to be able to fly, because everyone wants to fly.
Right.
Although this morning I sat through a meeting where I really wished I could read people's minds because everybody's face looked like, and all I could think of was in their heads they were thinking, maybe if I die I won't notice the transition.
Professor
But
Billings said.
anywho, Bigfoot in Rhode Island, it seems like a non sequitur. All right, because first of all, Rhode Island is the smallest state in the union. Now, for better context, right here.
This is Big Rhodey land, Western Rhode Island, and people have been talking a lot recently about this piece of footage from out here that purports to show possibly a Bigfoot. It was some people shooting video out the side of their car. They filmed the woods, as they said, for a piece of a documentary about their paranormal investigations. And they looked at the video later and saw this figure.
It's blurry. At one point, we go past this big tree, and maybe 30 feet behind the wall, 50 feet behind the wall, there's a large, dark figure. I can't tell if it's moving or not. My thoughts on the video are that I don't know what's in it. Maybe it's a Bigfoot, maybe it's not, maybe it's a stump, maybe it's a rock. I don't know. You can't really tell that much by looking at it.
The arm swing.
I didn't see an arm swing.
What's intriguing about the video is it is an upright figure. The rest of the team doesn't think they see it moving, but I'm just thinking I seen it turn and an arm swing up, like it's going to step away.
I see this video out of focus with, unless someone had actually pointed to me what I'm looking for, I wouldn't have even seen it.
These women claim that they're shooting this footage for some documentary that they're filming. If they're filming for a documentary, you'd think they would stop and make sure that their camera's in focus. Things just aren't adding up for me.
Once again, we come to another video that's ambiguous when you look at it. So it's going to be the context that determines the possibility whether it's real or not.
And so what we have here is a typical video of a Bigfoot. And
Oh my, that's
yeah,
all right.
you have pixelated something on a screen and nobody knows what's going on with you.
I don't know. Did you see the there was just like a flash of something.
I did not. I was concentrated on talking about Bigfoot.
Oh, like there was just like this like white flash, and I don't
Well,
what it's
aliens.
apparent. I think it was actually a reflection from the mail truck that just drove by,
Uh,
but like it scared the hell out of me. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, what the hell is this?
Wait, when we're talking about these kinds of things, we should definitely. Oh, you know what? Maybe I should take the pen out of my pocket and not have some big red thing sitting there. So, anyways,
Sorry.
Finding Bigfoot, a very typical setup in this show, but of course, the fact that it's in Rhode Island is the whole reason I brought it up. When people talk about Bigfoot, or Sasquatch or whatever the hell you want to call it, is skunk ape, which that's just a terrible name. We're going to call it Daryl. All right. When talking about Daryl, no, we're not going to call him Daryl.
Well, I feel like that's mean to Daryl Pettiford. We need a different name.
Oh, Leon.
Yeah, ain't any good Leon, so that's fine.
So when you talk about this, the idea of an 8-foot unidentified or undiscovered, quote unquote, hominid, when I was a child, everybody talked about it in the terms of the Pacific Northwest. And, they're talking about the Jerry Crews situation in the 1950s where, oil drums thrown around. And, then, of course, they find out that the Native American people supposedly had legends going back hundreds and hundreds of years of this creature. And then, of course, you start seeing that there actually were news reports about things that people couldn't identify. And now they're going back and saying, well, maybe it was this and maybe it wasn't. Who knows, right? But when I was a child, you definitely didn't hear about things like Bigfoot in Rhode Island. You didn't hear about Bigfoot in New York, which, of course, we know that there's several really, really not controversial, but well-known, pretty well-documented sightings in upper state New York. And when I was a kid, as I put in the blog post, I watched In Search of Bigfoot, the Bigfoot episode, and was convinced that the glowing red eyes outside the bedroom where Bigfoot broke into my house to look at me creepily from my hallway, which of course we know was just a demon.
Well, one would have hoped if Bigfoot had broken into your house to creep on you from the hallway, that you would have noticed Bigfoot long before he reached the hallway.
Well, yeah, I mean, my father couldn't walk up the stairs without me knowing, because of course he made the stairs creak. And how Bigfoot would get up, who knows? Okay, you're talking about a 6-year-old's mind or a 7-year-old's mind. All right. I mean, I can also remember being freaked out as a child. Like I think it was 6 or 7 years old, and a frost pattern appeared on my window, which of course was a 2nd-story window in my parents' home. And I was convinced it was the abominable snowman because I'd watched Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer the night before, as one does. The Bumble was scary.
Bumble was pretty scary.
I mean, I can remember a certain 6-year-old freaking out thinking that Dopey was going to get her.
Okay, well, Dopey was freaky, and did you miss the giant snake in that movie? Because that thing...
Yeah, well, yeah.
I think we found the route, the sourcing of my phobia here.
With the coalition.
Yes!
I can't wait to talk about mysterious giant coalition members. We're just gonna, when I show a clip, I'll just not share it to you. Just the audience will see it. So anyhow, going back to the original statement, when I was a kid though, and I make fun of people all the time. Like, this is such a bad thing I do. I make fun of people all the time who talk about, like, well, I think, I listened to this one particular podcaster called the Bigfoot Project, and Lynn Smith does it. She's a narrator, and she reads like these emails she gets in her very narrator voice, and it's supposedly true stories of Bigfoot encounters that never made it into any of the databases. Whether or not they're true or not, who knows, right? They can't all be made up, but some of them definitely sound like that one time in high school kind of stories,
I definitely did those.
And yeah, I'll take things that definitely never happened for 200, Alex. But right. I make fun of people when they say, well, I think it was in October of either 2003 or 2004. All right, but now I'm going to do that. So I will make fun of myself for saying this. I don't exactly remember the year that this happened. I remember what happened. And I used to have a friend named something that sounded a lot like Barbie's boyfriend's name. And
almost a good save there. There was almost a good save.
and what had happened was, so he had lived in this area of Westerly, my hometown, called Potter Hill. And Potter Hill at the time was not densely populated. It is now quite densely populated, but at the time it was not densely populated. This is the same guy, you've heard the stories, that I decided when I was 13 years old that we could make flaming arrows and then, dig a pit, put plastic, pour gasoline, shoot the arrow, and see if you could, like medieval something. Was
he
so
also the one that helped you make the wings out of wood?
no, that was my sister. Anyhow, that was cardboard, not wood. Anyhow, I was convinced that was going to work too. And people are like, I can no longer take you seriously. You made wings. Oh yeah, like you didn't. We know you all did.
No, if it was the wood, I had some serious questions for the physics behind the math there, because wood's heavy. Cardboard I could see, but you need like a wire structure through the cardboard to keep the like flaps in place.
Yeah, you realize that the second you jump out of the tree attached to your penguin wing sized
Penguin wings too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, they were like
Oh
oblong.
no.
The worst part was your great aunt was driving up to visit with my mom the moment I jumped out of the tree. Now I will say that the tree was only maybe 6 or so feet, like the branch I was on. That wasn't the only experiment with that, by the way. I also tried one time to make basically what it would now be called a squirrel suit, the flying squirrel suits, out of an old kite and a pair of long johns and like long underwear, the long johns and the t-shirt. Also not successful, but maybe slightly more successful than the cardboard rings. So anyways, going back to what I was talking about, so vivid imagination as a child. And I'm not going to say that I experienced a Sasquatch type creature. What I do remember of the day was when I was running around the woods with this particular friend, we both ran into like a miasma of smell, just like the funkiest, grossest, disgusting smell. And we were in the woods. We were deep in the woods. We were probably a mile or more away from any roads at this point. And we were headed towards what was an old quarry that was, like a mile and a half off the road. And of course there was in fact a dirt road that led to the quarry. We weren't on that side. We were going through the woods. And I just remember getting the impression of seeing something moving in the woods, not getting a clear sight of whatever the hell it was, but just seeing something in that smell. And, of course, by this point, I knew what a Bigfoot was in the sense of having seen the Patterson-Gimlin film, because that was widely put all over the In Search of, whatever shows were out at that time. I think even Wild World of Animals did an episode on the Bigfoot, if I remember correctly. And I would say that I was somewhere between 12 and 14 years old when this happened. And I never made any connection to the concept of a Bigfoot in Rhode Island until, lo and behold, 31 years later or so, I'm watching and forcing my poor children to watch Finding Bigfoot with the cast and characters that they are. And they go to Rhode Island and we're all laughing hysterically. Like you're going to Rhode Island and like this memory is there. And I'm going, wow, that was kind of interesting. And then one of the witnesses in the show was from Westerly, Rhode Island. And he claimed to have seen this creature while he was riding a bike in the area that they filmed it in. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily where this happened, was analogous to Potter Hill. It wasn't very far away from Potter Hill. It would have been, I guess, somewhere between Potter Hill and the Ashaway Hopkinton area. So who knows, right? Well, of course, the clip that we just watched was ridiculous. By the way, I can actually tell you where that was. That was 10 Rod Road. I think it was probably 10 Rod Road going between Exeter and Kingston, Rhode Island. So vaguely near URI, where there's about 1,000 historical cemeteries and those old stone walls that are so awesome. But they didn't. Come on. They didn't see anything in that clip.
No, that clip, like, I have pretty poor eyesight. Let's be honest. I'm sitting there with my face like this, looking at the screen, looking at the clip, and it's like, no. even with the big circle around what was supposedly the Bigfoot, it kind of does look like a grouping of leaves on a tree
Yeah.
blowing in a breeze. Like that's really what it looks like to me. Like,
but one of the things I want to take issue with in the clip is Renee. All right, who admittedly is one of my favorite characters, cast of characters in that grouping. Because I love the fact that she will debunk anything the second she sees it. All right. And of course, me being the person who always wants to believe everything, I need that. I need somebody to be like let's head back to reality land for a minute. But one of the things that I do have to take issue with her on this is like she says, well, if you're filming for your your podcast or your show that you're putting out on local cable, wouldn't you take time to stop and focus it? All right. And because we all know that they were filming from a car, and the lady, I think her name is Dina Pelosi, who actually is the person who took the pictures, the film. She's actually released a book now called Bigfoot in Rhode Island, Legend Meets Truth, or something like that. And so she actually did some research into Bigfoot stories around the state of Rhode Island. And she claims in that clip, or later on in the episode, which we can't show much of because I don't want to get content strikes here early on in our career, but she claims that she was actually filming that for a different kind of podcast thing about witches and myth and magic kind of stuff in Rhode Island. And that's, I think, what she primarily does is ghosts and witches, until this thing happened. She was convinced that what she saw was a Bigfoot. Now, I'm not calling her a liar by any stretch of the imagination. I think she may be mistaken. But I also have to say about the point that Renee was making is, no, you wouldn't have focused in. If you're driving in a car, there's no way to focus that in. And if you saw it in a split second, even if this is my biggest challenge, is the thing that I always say when somebody says, oh, if Bigfoot's real, you would everybody's walking around with a camera in their pocket, and they're okay, listen, I want you to do an experiment. Go out into the woods. All right. I want you to walk through the woods and have a bird, any bird, a known bird, a cardinal, a bright red bird, land in front of you. And I want you to try and take your phone out, turn on your phone app, focus in on the bird, take the picture, and have it come out clear.
How mad would you be if I did that and it came out clear?
I would say that the chances of that actually happening while you're actively walking in the woods are slim, nil, and none, and slim and nil left. Now,
I'll do one better. I'll do a bunny.
I will say that if you're sitting on your porch and bunnies are coming out, because I did this when we were to Arkansas, I sat out on the porch for hours taking pictures of marsh bunnies as they were wandering around. All right. I'm saying,
well, no, it's just the path behind our apartment here has, like, if you're walking down, you'll run into at least 4 bunnies.
Right, and they're acclimated to your presence.
They run away.
My thing is, most people do not have the wherewithal to actually take out the camera and take the picture before whatever it is gets away. Now, these two people were driving down a road in a car. They may not have even seen it until they reviewed the footage afterwards. So focusing in would have been almost impossible at that. Plus, if you're driving down the road and you have an automatic focus on your video camera, it's just going to focus in on whatever the front is. It's not going to focus behind that front. My favorite thing, though, too, is when you taking the cardinal example, there are cardinals that I could see with my eye in a tree that did in fact sit still long enough for me to take a picture of. And no matter how good the camera is on this, I have definitely had an issue with getting it focused in, taking the picture, and then being able to find the cardinal in the picture, even though I could see it clearly with just my eyesight. Now, that being said, I do think it's interesting that Rhode Island actually has its own name for Bigfoot, which is Big Rhodey, which I think is funny because I think Big is the given name of half of Rhode Island: Big Sal, Big Guido, Big John, Big Dave, Little Dave, of course, because that's this kid, Big Mike, We had one of those. We had even a little Mike, and then you had littler Mike. Although I was called Johnny 98% of the time when I was growing up by Big Mike. I'm not kidding. Yeah, nope.
None of your names are John or Johnny.
I know. My brother's name. Oh, sorry. Whoops. There's another whoops.
It wasn't me this time.
So yeah, but Big Rhodey, there are some sightings in Rhode Island, largely dealing with the western part. And I know Matt Moneymaker says this is Western Rhode Island, Big Rhodey land. Okay, Western Rhode Island is what, maybe 5 miles wide. It's not exactly
The
a
whole
huge
thing's
area,
like 30 miles. Like,
but of course it also connects to Connecticut, and it connects to very eastern Connecticut, and there's not a lot of cities in eastern Connecticut, as you get to North Grosvenor and that kind of area. So you do have enough woods that yes, something could be living or migrating through there. I mean, we've had moose come through Rhode Island from time to time. You do hear about wolves once in a great while. You definitely have lynx that come through Rhode Island and Connecticut. But I would doubt seriously that like Bigfoot's like hanging out in Arcadia Park, over in Burlingame State, Park, with the campers. But which, by the way, that's where part of the filming was done, was in Burlingame. And yes, possible for it to be passing through, particularly if it was coming off of, say, the Appalachian Trail, or moving from one area of New York and Connecticut to Massachusetts or some other thing. There is, as I mentioned before, there are a couple of dedicated troop groups, for Rhode Island Bigfoots, Squatchachusetts, of course. They're the big ones who study in most of New England. And then there was another one, which I have to drag the name up here, a Big Rhodey Research Project, and that's I'm sorry, that girl's name was Dina Pellezzini, by the way. And they definitely they take it pretty seriously. They've been working on it for a while. That area of Rhode Island is very forested, though. So I'll give this a qualified maybe. I'm going to say that I did love the fact that one of the people in the Finding Bigfoot episode, I mean, my hometown being featured was kind of pretty cool. But then again, it could have also been my cousin Sal with his shirt off, just saying. As far as the idea of a population of Bigfoot living in Rhode Island, no, I don't buy that. Passing through maybe once in a great while. That would also explain why there's only 3 reports in the BFRO database. And as I had sent to you yesterday, I think it's funny that the two of the major databases don't even agree with each other. So that's kind of fun too. Anyhow, oh no, we're already getting the warning. Jeez, witches. Tell me about witches. You got 10 minutes. Go.
I have notes.
Yay.
I had notes for the vampires too. I just apparently couldn't be bothered to read them. So witches. Funnily enough, in Rhode Island, there is a thing called the Rhode Island Witches Guild. And it is estimated that there are 2,000 members of the Rhode Island Witches Guild, which is approximately half the population of Rhode Island. Like, there's like 5 people there. Come on, guys.
Not true. I think there's Rhode Island is, if memory serves, one of the more densely populated states.
But like
ratio size to population.
I thought it was kind of funny that there was.
So there's at least 10,000 people live there.
Well, I just thought it was funny that like there was 2,000 members of the Rhode Island Witches Guild. It actually severely impeded my research because there was so much information on like their group activities and what they do and when they gather and like events that they host, that like finding research on like historical situations with witches was hard. Like I had to go at least 5 pages back in the Google search history to like find something of relevant. Part of this is because Rhode Island did not participate in the witch hysteria back in like the 17, 18, 1900s. Like they didn't
burn people?
No. Mostly because it was considered one of the more religiously free states that like during its time period. Like you know, in Massachusetts, you had to be this religion. In Connecticut, you had to be that religion. But in Rhode Island, they were kind of like, eh.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Which is why Rhode Island is now what, 85% Catholic, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Because they were being prosecuted by the Protestants. Anyway, the Green Witches, I did learn this by looking through the Rhode Island Witches Guild. Apparently, it is offensive to draw green witches, if you didn't know that, because they were depicted as being green from the amount of torture that they were under when they were in jail cells. During the like witch hysteria, when they were captured and everything, they would be drugged and beaten and like all of this thing, and it kind of gave them like a greenish tint to their skin, as like gangrene sets in. And that originated during the Spanish Inquisition. So green witches come from the Spanish Inquisition, from people being beaten. And that is why witches of today don't like that. There are a couple of records of historical witches, one being Dolly Ellen Cole. There's a lot of conflicting stories about her. Some have her as a vampire, some have her as a ghost, and some have her as a witch. Most agree she was accused of witchcraft. She was 27. She was gifted in healing with, you know, herbs and that type of stuff. But eventually the village turned on her, and this was in 1865. They burned her house while she was out gathering mushrooms and herbs and everything in the forest, and her kid was burned alive in the house. Yeah. So she cursed it, she swore revenge, and she kind of ran off into the woods. And she supposedly was near a stream that was part of a mill. And this is where the stories get a little conflicting. Some say she drowned, some say she was pushed in, some say she was brutally murdered. Like there's a whole bunch of like conflicting accounts as to what actually happened to her. But most agree eventually she was found dead in the stream. And it's said that while she was fleeing, they would remember and see her. And this was at near Hopkins Mills Cemetery. And so apparently, even to this day, by that stream, you can see a ghost of a woman walking through the woods, walking through the stream, in the stream. Like there's a bunch of conflicting like reports of people seeing her. So if she was a witch, she succeeded in her goal of remaining around. Like she wanted people to remember her and what happened to her. The stories may be conflicting, but she's definitely made a mark. There's also a witch's altar in Narragansett, and that's on the corner of Hazard Ave and Gibson Ave. And this was built in 1960 some odd. I didn't write down the exact date. I know it's the 1960s, by Joseph Hazard. He had a obsession with like druids, witches, like just anything that was slightly supernatural, he was super into. And so he had these smooth upright stones imported from Ireland and Scotland, and he arranged them in a druidic circle with an altar in the middle. And there's a whole bunch of stories of like human sacrifices and rituals being performed at this spot, but it is in a fairly not I don't know what the word I'm looking for is.
Affluent.
Yeah, that one. Neighborhood. And nobody, like, if sacrifices are being performed there, nobody's witnessed or stopped it. Granted, things could have been happening there in the 1960s and 70s when nobody would have seen it. But it remains standing there today. It is apparently a bit of a freaky place to visit. Something about it just doesn't feel quite right. It could be because he removed grave markers from, you know, people in Ireland and Scotland, and that just doesn't seem like a good thing to do for your health and safety. But hey.
So I've actually been there.
Yeah? Is it freaky?
Yeah, it is. When I was in college, I visited there with my friend David and some other people who were into the whole druid thing at the time. I would say definitely no to human sacrifice, yes to feeling like it's haunted as hell there.
Well, I'm sure it is. If he took old druidic stones from Ireland or Scotland like that, like that seems like a really bad plan. Like,
Yes.
You know, like talk about
Yes.
like inviting misfortune. Like,
You know, to me, it's like
yeah.
that scene from Ghostbusters where, you know, they're in the building and they're talking about, or they're in jail and they're talking about the building and how it was built as a spiritual superconductor.
Mhm.
And that's why that particular building was haunted. That's what that feels like there.
Well, I mean, I've been to the Druidic Circle that's on the grounds of Blarney Castle too, and it's like I wouldn't like you
Not on
couldn't
a full moon
put
night
one of
wearing a
those
cloak.
stones. Like there is no way in anything that I'd be like, yeah, let me move one of these stones and bring it with me. Like,
Yeah, I mean, talk about your sheer hubris. Like, oh,
yeah,
I'm gonna have this
it's
brought over to
fine.
Rhode Island.
Yeah, like no, that was
Nothing,
dumb.
nothing
That
bad
was
could be happening.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
for sure. So, but like I said, it was kind of hard to find like any historical accounts of anything. Like there are plenty of people in Rhode Island who claim to be witches. There are plenty of stories of people who, even in like modern times, are like, I'm pretty certain she's a witch. But like finding a historical or like more captivating case of it is kind of hard at the moment, just because there are so many reports that to sift through. There was like 7,000 that I was trying to read through and find one that was like not somebody sitting there with on Instagram making a reel about a candle spell. Like
Yeah.
that was difficult.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, as I alluded to in the last um episode, finding a witch in Rhode Island is a lot like take out your pickleball ball and just chuck it to somebody and you've pretty much got a 50-50 shot at that point. Which is weird for such a Catholic state. I'm just saying.
Yes.
I wonder how many of the Wiccans are also Catholics, because I'm sure that goes really well together. Um,
What?
I definitely I would love you know, one of our trips up there. I would love to take some pictures at the Druidic the altar, but from outside the fencing.
They took the fencing down, I think.
Oh, well, they had it when I had gone. It was like a stone wall around it.
Oh
And there were
yeah,
these
no.
two posts that you had to pass through, because the two posts, when you walk through the two posts, you definitely felt like you passed from one point to another
Weird.
point, and that was not a good point. And I mean, yeah. So I think the timer is telling us our time is up. I think I'm going to start delving into ghosts of
Oh, I
Rhode
thought we were
Island.
both together.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, no, I definitely think that that's our next stop. I think I've gone as far as I can with hairy men in Rhode Island. Probably we could do a little more deep dive into to witches too. But yeah, we're gonna have that same issue. Finding a haunted place in Rhode Island. By the way, Squatchnet, that website I sent you, they say very little about hauntings in Rhode Island, but haunting in Rhode Island is, again, take out a pickleball and throw it.
Well, that
That
time's not even 50-50 shot. It's just straight up like
yeah. Anything.
Well, I'm at
This is-
home. I'm recording at home, and I don't know how loud this mic is because I'm using the Rhodes mic as opposed to the one I usually use on my desk. But I wanted to grab you for, even if we only do 10 minutes, because I was so excited yesterday. And I know you know why I was so excited yesterday, because I already sent it to you. But I was so excited because we spent, half an hour really talking about Bigfoot in Rhode Island and 12 minutes talking about witches in Rhode Island, which, by the way, I also found other stuff on witches that I put up into the blog, because there's actually a Rhode Island author who specializes in witches, wenches, and wild women of Rhode Island.
Yes,
She's a Rhode Island-based author. I was like, that's just a great name for a book. But that being said, so imagine my shock. My favorite podcast, which everybody can see right now, is on the screen. And I'm giving a huge shout out to Lynn Smith and the Bigfoot Project with this. But she actually did 2 stories in this particular version are about Rhode Island Bigfoots.
yes.
Which was fantastic. But the thing that was most important to me, and I can't find the precise moments. I've been trying.
Oh,
All right.
it's listed in the caption.
What?
The precise moments where you're looking for in here, it's in
Yeah.
the descriptions and it's in the captions.
Oh, well, I know that this one is this takes place in Glendale, Rhode Island, which
with
is
Bigfoot on a trail. The exact date was October
Get the hell out of
15th,
me.
1998. I was training for a mountain bike race, and this was to be my last ride prior to the race.
I feel like
I was
Pooh waiting
riding at
for
the
honey.
Black Hut Management Area in Glendale, Rhode Island. Along for the ride was my 3
I do have to say this while I'm thinking about it. It actually sounds like she uses an AI voice.
I was about to say, is she AI or is she a person? Because
In the beginning, I think she was a person, but she also has gotten huge. Like, I mean, she's putting out pretty much an episode a day, and they're all 30, 40-minute long episodes. So, you're
Right.
you're not pulling that off as a human. Anyways, so Glendale, Rhode
3-year-old
Island.
mixed breed Shepherd
Yes.
Lab large dog. It was sunny but cool, and I had planned to spend an hour or so breaking a sweat.
I wanna
Hunter in
get
a
to the
bar
description.
and asked him if he ever hunted at Black Hut. He said yes, and once I saw a white gorilla there. I had chills, and I related my story. The differences were in color. He stated white, the one I saw was more gray, and said the one he saw was 8 feet tall. Still, same place, same type of sighting.
All right. I don't care about the ad. Here.
Warning. You could soon
We'll just
lose
cut
your
this out
job
anyways.
because
Nobody
what's
will
happening
care. Nobody will even
inside
see
this
this because
building
I've
you see
learned how to
behind
do
me.
this stuff so much better now. Anyways,
Excellent.
so again, this is the thing, and what really shocked me and made me so happy when this came up on my feed yesterday is, if you remember 3 days ago when we were talking about the Bigfoot in Rhode Island thing, and I was talking about Powder Hill and seeing the impression of a gray something in the woods. This is the miasma of smell and all this other stuff, and just not really being able to say I saw something, but I felt like it was there and it was kind of gray. And then the Finding Bigfoot episode that I referenced, Big Rhodey, also the guy who is one of the witnesses, and I know we didn't get into the witnesses because I just want to make fun of the people with the pixelated pictures, but the witness, particularly the one who saw one in the Potter Hill area of Westerly, Rhode Island, saw a gray gorilla. And here's another one, Glendale, Rhode Island, which is right up that western side. I almost said western coast, like as if Rhode Island has a western coast. The western coast would be called Connecticut. But this guy is talking about a gray gorilla, and then the other guy he talks to in the bar talks about a white one. And so here we are.
Too close for comfort. I've told very few people this story for fear that they might think I'm crazy. My story takes place in
Like I'm
Charleston,
acting right
Rhode
now.
Island in the late 1970s. My mother and father and I lived in a wooded area abutting the Indian Cedar Swamp and property owned by United Nuclear, which probably comprises several thousand acres.
By the way, I want to point out, I think that what she's talking about in this, as far as I could trace down, is basically the area that Rhythm and Roots is now held. So what I think they call that now maybe Ninigret
Yeah.
Park or something like that. But it was, I mean, all of Rhode Island at one point was some sort of a military-esque training zone. I mean, you had the Quonset airport, you had obviously EB was up in Quonset as well as down in Groton, just whatever, 30 miles to the south, southwest, I guess, whatever. But what they had was lots of woods, because Rhode Island wasn't always densely populated. It always has been kind of densely populated, but of course Rhode Island is such a small state. I mean, it was densely populated when there's 300,000 people living in a state that's whatever 35 miles by 27 miles. All right, going on.
The property surrounding our home was mixed white Atlantic
This made me
juniper
so
swamp,
happy.
scarlet, red,
I
and
can't
white
even begin
oaks
to tell you.
with old-growth white pine stands mixed in, with a dense understory of briars, mountain laurel, and blueberry brush.
Mountain laurel.
We lived off a road with 3 houses on it. The houses were all built close to the entrance of this development.
3 houses.
The
My
road was
had
part of a
7.
series of
We
roads that
big
were put
house.
in as the
Big
start
house
of a
and garage.
development. The roads were oiled gravel and had been left to grow in after years of little or no use. It looked like the developer had started and went belly up. These roads were great to ride bikes on or take an evening cruise on. After bringing my father dinner at his second job, my mother drove a baby blue Mustang Mach 1, and she would drive around the roads with me looking for deer.
Your grandmother never drove a baby blue Mustang Mach 1, and I am sadder for that. Although your grandmother on your mom's side did in fact drive a Mustang, but it was one of those crappy ones from the middle 90s. But,
And it was green.
And it was green. And I got to drive it once in a while too. And that was kind of fun. It
Before
was
we
a
went
cool
home
car
for
when
the
I
evening.
drove it.
As a kid, I remember this being a highlight to the evening. I was
I
at
like
the
this, so they're
time
going
maybe
out
8 years
spotting
old,
deer.
and my mother and I were on
Tells
this
you how much
particular night in the late 70s, commenced our drive around the roads
the
to see
greatest
if we could
tumbler
see
of all
any
time.
deer. It had been raining earlier with thunder and lightning mixed in. Now it was just raining. We were rounding a corner on one of the roads that paralleled the Indian Cedar Swamp, and as we started downward, we noticed the road was blocked by a large blown-down oak tree.
Yeah, I don't know. I
The
noticed
tree
that
had
yesterday
green
when I
leaves.
was
This
listening to
makes
it.
me think it was either summer or early fall. So it had recently come down. We guessed maybe in the storm earlier, possibly by lightning. The road was very narrow, and the brush along the side of the road made it difficult to back the car around to turn around. The rain was falling, but not heavy. The wipers were on. The headlights on the car were on as well. As my mother turned the front end of the car, the lights cast on the left side of the road where the tree had been broken off from its stump. We were maybe 1.5 car lengths from the stump. Beside the tall, fractured stump stood what looked like a large white, yellowish white, ape. It was maybe 6 to 7 feet tall. Its hair was long, face flat, long massive arms. Its head appeared to be without a neck, and its chest was broad. My mother and I froze momentarily, 5, maybe 10 seconds, and the figure remained still, staring at us. My mother floored the car into reverse. I remember the terror of it all. The sound of gravel hitting the inside fender walls, the sound of the brush crashing against the car, and then the acceleration as she sped off. We were clear as to what we saw, and we have no question in our mind that we saw something or someone with an ape-like shape that night. This we were certain of.
Okay. So here's the thing. And why I wanted to do this today. The preponderance of evidence is that there's something different about a preponderance. We weren't parlaying anything. We were prepondering it.
I see. We weren't straight up pondering either.
Well, we weren't pondering this either because I'm jumping in with both feet. I mean, here's the thing. It seems odd. A lot of these reports in this area all seem to point to a white thing. And I know you texted yesterday, like, wouldn't it be kind of weird if it was an albino? Which,
Well, I think that would explain the size difference because I mean, if you look at like humans with albino or
albinoism.
Yeah, that's the word. Like if you look at humans who have albinoism or are albino, they're smaller, typically. Like they're not as large. So that would explain why they saw, a 6 to 7 foot Bigfoot, and the mountain biker was like said it was a rather small looking, like it wasn't small as in like compared to a human, but compared to the normal sighting of like a 10, 11 foot Bigfoot, it's smaller.
Correct. And I think it's very interesting. And obviously a lot of this is very interesting to me because of course we're talking about my home state, but we're also, we're talking about a critter that is different. If you go to the BFRO website, neither of these two sightings are in the BFRO database. One may be in the Squatchnet one, the one that I showed you that also lists 0 haunted places in most of Rhode Island. It has like 5 haunted places in all of Rhode Island.
Like aliens, I think.
Yeah, it does have aliens. In fact, I think last year there were 5 UFO sightings, which is
had a graph
3
that
more.
was comparing alien sightings to Bigfoot sightings and the correlation between the two. I thought that was a very funny graph to have made.
Well, it is interesting if you ever get a chance to listen to Ronnie LeBlanc from Expedition Bigfoot, and he is one of the guys who used to pal around with, I think, the Paranormal Sasquatch group with RPG, and I think he actually appears in 1 or 2 episodes of Finding Bigfoot as well. He's what would be called a woo person in the Bigfoot area because he has this belief that the paranormal and Bigfoot are intertwined in the sense of like, oh, you see orbs and then Bigfoot show up. You see a spaceship and Bigfoot shows up, which, by the way, when you're talking about like Bigfoot as being a being versus like a spiritual thing. I, you know, I don't see any evidence of that. I see Bigfoot as a hominid that is a leftover from, you know, a different age or whatever. I don't think it's coming interdimensionally, but there's a lot of people who have that feeling. I feel that their feelings are invalid, but that's just me. Well, I do. I'm sorry. I don't see any evidence. I mean, and I'm sure if we ever have an audience for this show, people in the audience will be like, "There's no evidence for Bigfoot either," and it's like, well, no, that's not true. There is evidence. There's as much evidence of Bigfoot as there's of ghosts, and a very large preponderance of people, or plurality of people in the country, believe in ghosts. And I don't know. I got hooked on that word today. I guess that's where we're at. But I was just so excited that Lynn Smith decided to do this particular couple of stories. And again, all of the stories of Rhode Island that have been reported all indicate a gray or white creature. And I just think that that's super interesting. I don't think it's because they have Old Man of the Mountain over there. Because some of the reports in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine also have a white or gray creature involved.
Well,
they also do have the cinnamon normal color too.
Well, it's not. I don't think it would be out of the question for it to be like the same. If it was from the same time period, I wouldn't like.
It could be the same creatures, right?
Yeah. Well, because I was gonna say, like, as you frequently say, because when we were talking about like bears or mountain lions and stuff, and you know, they always say that there's none in Maryland, but they definitely are in Maryland. They don't exactly follow state boundaries. Like, they're not gonna get to the edge of Rhode Island and be like, oh, I can't go any further. Like, that's it.
Well,
and
you
it's
know,
not that far of a walk. If like, because if you're a Bigfoot, you're just walking through the woods all the time. Like, people hike the Appalachian Trail. Why is that any different? You know.
Well, I've definitely asked a member of our family who may or may not have walked the Appalachian Trail a number of times in his life, if he's ever seen any evidence in, you know, he thinks I'm nuts anyways, but that's a whole other story. And I think he's nuts. So, you know, I mean, it works out well. But the reality is, I can't fathom that he's never seen any evidence. I know myself personally, like I said, the thing that happened to me when I was 12 or 13 years old.
Wildflowers.
Yeah, Bigfoot could actually, we could have like Sasquatch, you know, playing out in the forest, and he wouldn't notice, because he also almost stepped on an alligator. I mean, let's be real.
And then fell in a river. Like, I'm sorry, love him dearly. He's hilarious. But these are all true stories. Like,
two things can be true at once. That's very true. But the other side to this is he also could potentially mistake bear sign for being, you know, Bigfoot sign for being bear sign, and vice versa. I mean, myself, I can be just as guilty as this. I can remember being with your mom up in Champagne Falls area of the Kakamega highway up in New Hampshire, and we were hiking, and we were looking at tracks, and we were specifically looking for moose tracks, because your mom wants to see mooses. And I know, by the way, more people die from moose than they do from bear every year, but that's a whole other, although we now have Tatanka is taking over.
No, I think that I think the moose are actively avoiding Mom, because the amount of time that this woman goes out and looks for the moose, and not a single moose is to be found. Like, you would think that they are in fact like this mysterious, magical, mythical being, because Mom goes moose hunting and literally it's like they've all just gone poof, goodbye.
Yep. I gotta run downstairs for 1 second, so I'll be right back, because I have an alarm going off and it's driving me crazy.
You made it.
I did.
Did you find out what your alarm was for?
Oh yeah, it was for the meat pies.
Oh, well, that does make sense, doesn't it?
It does. So anyways, so we were up at Champagne Falls, and we were looking at these tracks, and honestly, when I first saw the tracks, I thought they were either bear or a moose, because they were kind of big. And when we were kind of looking at them, I'm not sure I know how moose. I don't know that I know how they walk. I don't think that they walk like bears, where sometimes a bear will actually inlay its back paw into the front paw, which gives you sometimes that impression that it's a Bigfoot print.
Right. Because you got the
But you got to look for the claw marks in the front, right? I kind of thought that they walked like a normal ungulate, and so they would, you know, boom, 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 right? But this was definitely something that looked more two-legged than four-legged. And at the time, I mean, I was really into Bigfoot by this point in my life anyways. I was probably 23, 24 years old when this happened. But at the time, I remember telling your mom, you know, like, I wonder, you know, I've never really heard of, like, there hadn't been reports of Bigfoot sightings in New England ever at that point, because there was no internet. There was no, you know, what you heard of Bigfoot and Sasquatch was, you know, Indian lore, Wendigo, Bigfoot, and, you know, California, Humboldt County, up through the Pacific Northwest. Nobody really talked about all these sightings that happened around the country because they didn't get there.
right.
And now looking back, you know, and again, I can't say it was, you know, big Sasquatch tracks or whatever, but it was interesting enough to me that I remember it, you know. So anyways.
Do you want my joke response or do you want like a serious response?
Well, there were two sets, so he wasn't hopping along throughout.
Well, see, but that's what I'm saying. If there was two sets, it can't be a Bigfoot because by my theory,
he only has one leg.
only have one leg and they hop through the woods. So,
And you know, I'm not foolish enough to, I mean, I obviously I'm a believer, for lack of a better term, but I'm not foolish enough to think every odd thing that happens in the woods is a Sasquatch. And you
sometimes
know,
they're albino deer. Freak you the hell out.
that's also true. I wish I could get that video off of the my
Motorola.
moto. Yeah, I don't know if I can. That would be a good one to spend some time on, because that night freaked the crap out of all of us.
Well, it was
know?
just you and I.
Oh no, Alex was with us.
No, he wasn't. Not on that one.
Pretty sure the night that we filmed in the woods, that night hike, that was just you and I.
That was just you and I. He had come with us on some of them, but he stayed back on that one, and that one was freaky as hell.
That was like the night that we were walking. Your mom and I were walking the Reach, and we had an owl land directly in front of us.
Yeah,
and just
I had that happen not that long ago, actually. I mean, not that long ago. I mean, like 3 years ago. But there was a trio of little baby owls, and they landed on that like pole by the hill.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. Anyways, I thought that was super cool, and I thought it was very cool to have, you know, obviously, hopefully Lynn Smith, if she sees this, which I'm sure she won't, but let's say that if she ever does, she'll appreciate the fact that we borrowed her materials for a short period of time to just highlight the idea of Bigfoot in Rhode Island, but also specifically to highlight the idea that the Bigfoot in Rhode Island seem to tend towards being gray and or white.
Yellowish.
Yeah, yellowish. Not a bear, by the way. I mean, I've never encountered anybody who's ever claimed to see an albino bear. Of course, you know, not everybody who sees a bear comes back and talks about it. Oh, my emotional support dog is going to start barking about any second then.
Is it Bella? I love Bella.
It is Bella.
I love Bella.
Oh, there she goes. Can you still hear her?
Bella, what are you doing?
She's barking a lot. I'm assuming that there's something untoward happening on the road. Either a squirrel has crossed it, a child is riding a bike, or an Amazon Prime has arrived.
I was gonna say, you gotta watch out for them Amazon Prime guys. Bella does not like the Prime guys.
No, Bella does not like Amazon Prime, and I'm assuming that Amazon Prime does not like Bella very much either.
Well, that's just a crime. They absolutely should like Bella.
Well, they should be bringing her treaties.
They should be bringing her treaties. She deserves
absolutely. All right, so I'm going to sign off because now I can use this for this episode. I'm so excited. I was like, if you couldn't make it between now and when I wanted to finish post on this, I was going to be like, well, I will have to film it on my own, because I felt it was so important to put into this. But then if it's just me by myself, then I'm just ranting and I don't have, you know, like and then I'm just ranting to myself in the camera. And then if that's true, then I should be like a political pundit, because that's what politician people do is they just rant.
I made it. I was here. We got back from Walmart and our Halloween shopping. But we didn't actually get anything that was Halloween related.
Well, I didn't end up buying those LED lanterns at Goodwill yesterday either.
Why? They were so cute.
Because I had a limit of how much I could spend, and it was going to put me $4 over the limit. But I got this shirt.
That's a nice. I think Brad has a matching shirt. Actually, is it like a like olive army green color with stripes? Yeah, Brad has that exact polo. He got it from Brian, but that's his Friday work shirt.
My students a lot of times will ask me like, "Where do you shop, Mr. Barber?" I'm like, Goodwill.
Goodwill. Yeah, it's somebody. I'm wearing a dress from Goodwill because we went out to lunch. And somebody stopped me in Walmart and said complimented the dress, and I was like, I got it at Goodwill.
Yeah, you know what? I think my 3 best pairs of shoes came from Goodwill. I just got a nice pair of Bass, like the Oxfords, the tan ones. I'm like, these are awesome. Like
I got these when we were before we went to Ireland. And I actually got them new, which was pretty strange, but it's really weird because I tried on every pair of size 9 shoes in the store, and not one of them fit. They were all way too small, and but all the 10s were also way too small. And I was like, I'm normally a size 9. What the hell? Would you like to guess what size shoe this is?
Size 7.
8. What the hell?
I who knows?
But the reason I thought that was because they were waterproof, and we were going to Ireland in March.
Good choice. Definitely a good choice.
And they had a good tread, which was great because I almost fell flat on my ass at the Blarney Castle, and that would have been embarrassing as hell.
Also true. See, I solved that problem by just not traveling. But you know, if we continue to do these episodes, I'm gonna have to start traveling, because I'm gonna have to like start doing bug fitting at night and other things. Go looking for ghosts.
Hey, Brad and I are trying to narrow down our European destination for next year. We could roll in a good Banshee tour.
Well, yeah. Oh, Josh Gates did that with Destination Truth.
Still
a criminally underrated show.
Absolutely. That is an excellent show.
Yeah, I have to say that I think one of the more interesting things I ever learned was that my dad watches Expedition Unknown.
Is he really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went in one night while we were up there on this last trip, and I was like, hey, what's going on, and I sat down, and he was, oh, I was just checking this out, I really like this guy's show, and I'm like, I do too,
like, oh my god.
So I told him about some other episodes. I actually told him a little bit about Destination Truth, because there's a lot of really funny episodes that he did of Destination Truth. So what if the cast members had to change every so often?
Oh, it's fine.
This year's medical officer will be filled in by the part of Ricky. We don't know where Ronnie is, or if he's been digested yet. Always makes me think of Mutual of Omaha. They used to have that show in the 1970s called The Wild Kingdom. Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And yet it was done by this guy named Marlon Perkins. I have no idea what he really did in life. I don't know if he was a narrator in real life, if he really was an explorer in real life. I really have no idea. But what I do know is anytime there was a dangerous animal, Jim had to go and check it out. He'd be like, while Jim is wrestling the alligator, I'm going to look over here at the yellow belly sapsucker. He'd have his old binoculars out, and he'd be looking at the bird. In the background, you hear Jim going, no, Great show. It was the 70s. Nobody had HR departments.
Oh, poor Jim.
Poor Jim. There were a lot of Jims over the years, because he was sort of like a red shirt.
Oh.
On Star Trek. All right. Anyways, I'm going to roll off, and I'm going to put together our episode 2, of which hopefully we'll actually release episode 1 at some point. What was that? The cat playing drums?
Well, I'm waiting to start the social accounts until we get a couple episodes out, remember?
Oh yeah, well, we need to
That way
do
I
that.
have that way I can direct people to someplace instead of just being like, and this is here, but it's not here. So
Yeah. All right. Well,
it's National Call Meghan Night.
truth. And this doesn't count because this is working.
Right. So
Or what we call working.
Hey, you know what? I'd much rather do this for work than anything else right now. So
So people need to like, subscribe, and
yes.
maybe we should start a Patreon.
I took pictures of books in Target today for my book account, my Bookstagram account. I need to post this.
All right. We need to roll because I just got the warning. I need to upgrade this week. That way.
Yeah, because if we're talking about ghosts in Rhode Island this week, it's gonna be like 7 hours if we don't like.
Oh, that's at least 2 episodes. I'm telling you, I could do an episode just. In fact, we should curate stories of 43 Blackstone Avenue. That's our teaser for next episode. Curated stories of 43 Blackstone Avenue.
A specific address. Look it up. Look it up on Zillow. Go scroll through the pictures.
I think I've actually already publicly put a picture of 43 on the last episode, and I purposely made it opaque so it looked like it was haunted. But I realized as I was looking at it, you don't actually have to make it look haunted. It just is. You know?
It doesn't need a lot of the help.
It doesn't need help.
No.
But yeah, I mean, definitely curated stories of 43 Blackstone. And then, you know, I personally have a lot of ghost stories from Rhode Island. By the way, I did want to point out, back to the witches episode for just a moment, behind the old house in Westerly, there was this giant oak tree. So before they built up the HOA that's there now, behind where that house is, there used to be all woods that went between the 10th fairway and I guess it's the 13th fairway of the
golf course.
Winnipogue golf course. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember if it was Winnipogue or Weekapoug, but it's Winnipogue. And anyways, in that oak tree, that giant oak tree, the rumors is that was actually a witch's circle. And I'm not going to tell too many tales out of water here because some of the guilty party is not here to defend themselves, or at least unless I called them and put them on the Zoom meeting. But rumor has it that members of my close family used to illicitly leave the house in the evenings to go out there to see if anybody ever did anything in the witch's circle. Those people never found a damn thing, and we never got caught, to our knowledge.
Which one was it?
Well, there's only 2, and it ain't Mel.
That's what I thought.
Hey, she used to have quite the adventurous spirit. She seems to have gotten it back a little bit lately. So
It's so funny.
I'm
supposed to. We had mentioned maybe going up for Labor Day, but I don't think we are.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's $200 to drive up there. Never mind gas.
That's crazy. That's the worst part about New England and New York in that area is the tolls and the cost of everything.
Yeah. Well, and we don't want to go up without the car again.
Yeah. Well, that I mean, thank God she was able to let us borrow her car while we were up there last time. I was actually thinking one of the things that one of the episodes that we should do actually should also circle back to Wheeler Road and the cemetery.
With the feather in the ground?
Yes.
Yeah, that's freaky.
And I think we have pictures of that particular incident in our lives. All right. And with that, thank you for joining me again today. And we'll release episode 1 hopefully this coming week, right? And
yeah, by the time that they see this episode, that's going to make no sense in the context.
That's true, but it's a teaser. Or is it not? Maybe somebody will find episode 2 and not realize that there was an episode 1. Because they don't know how to count.
So me. So I would realize.
Okay, I think I had more fun with this part of the episode than I did the first part when we were filming in my office. But anyways, have yourself a great day. It is in fact International Call Meghan night. And hopefully next week's episode won't be an hour and a half long. Because that's about what this is going to time out to be after we do all this.
Well, I think it's going to be worse.
All right. Hey, you take care of yourself. I'll see you. Bye.
Bye.